Practice, practice, practice. Whether you're a teacher, a student, or a parent, we all know practice is the way to get better at piano. But exactly how much do you need to be practicing in order to see progress? Hey, I'm Phoenix, and I'm the Tattooed Piano Teacher. I've been teaching piano for a couple of decades and playing for much longer than that, and I know that times have changed. The days of cookie-cutter rules for practice time, high commitment demands from piano teachers is a thing of the past, and us piano teachers have to come into the 21st century and work with a variety of students in a variety of different situations. But because we're moving away from this cookie cutter approach, it often means that if you ask someone, how much should I be practicing the piano? The answer is usually, well, it depends. And although that is true, it's not very helpful. Today, I'm gonna work past that cliche of it depends, and I'm gonna give you some clear-cut formulas to try to match you or your piano student with the perfect practice schedule. And if you teach piano, be sure to watch to the end of this video. You're going to have all the information you need to help your students and parents and answer all of those piano practice questions. So before I give you my simple practice formula, let's talk about the different factors that can affect your personal magic weekly practice time. Those factors are age, level, goals, and lifestyle. So put a pin in that. We'll come back to those later. Now I'm going to give you a simple formula, a blanket formula as a starting point to figure out your perfect practice time or your student's perfect practice time. Here's the formula. Take your weekly lesson length. So if you take 30-minute lessons, then your weekly lesson length is 30 minutes, okay? Multiply that by 1 to get the bare minimum total weekly practice minutes. Multiply that by 2.5 to get the average progression rate of getting better at the piano as your total weekly practice minutes, and multiply by 5 to reach virtuoso status, where you're really fast-paced growth, moving ahead as quickly, doing everything you can to get better at piano. Okay, now let me break this down with an example. So probably the most common lesson length would be weekly lessons at 30 minutes a week. So let's take that figure and plug it into the formula. For 30-minute lessons, if you are practicing a total amount of practice minutes throughout the week of 30 minutes, so that means perhaps 5 minutes this day, 6 minutes that day, whatever you're doing, it adds up to 30 minutes total. That is the bare minimum to not digress, to move along at a snail's pace, or at least keep from losing the skills that you've already acquired. So bare minimum, you're doing the number of minutes that your lesson is as a total weekly minutes practice. Hope that makes sense. Now, if you want to do the average growth that I would recommend for the average student, then take that 30 minutes, multiply that by 2.5. We get 75, and that's the total weekly minutes practice. So this could look like a schedule of practicing 5 times a week at 15 minutes per practice session for a total of 75 minutes in between each lesson. For the average student, this is going to be the perfect balance of living your life and still getting good at the piano. But if you really want to go hardcore for piano, then let's multiply that 30 by 5. Here we get a weekly minute total of 150 minutes throughout the week. So if we break that down, you could practice every single day of the week for 20 minutes, or if you want to practice 5 days a week, then you would have to do 30 minutes per practice session. Now, any teacher would be thrilled with a student practicing this much. For a lot of people, it is just not practical with their daily schedule, and that's okay, but that is like the top goal, let's say. Now, if you have no idea exactly how many minutes you're practicing throughout the week, it might be helpful to do a little practice audit, and I do have a free practice chart which will track your minutes for 12 weeks to see where you're at and what your weekly totals are, and if you'd like to grab that, the link is in the description. As I mentioned, this is just a blanket simple formula, but we have those factors that we have to now add in. These are the exceptions to the rule that might affect your personal magic practice total. So you'll recall that the first factor was age. So here are some things to consider based on the age of the piano player. For ages 3 to 5, I focus on days practiced, not minutes. The reason for that is that long practice sessions are not necessarily super helpful, productive, or fun for that age group. However, doing something on a daily basis is really important for them. So for my young students, I actually don't usually track their minutes at all. I just have them jot down how many days during the week they got to the piano, whether that's 1 minute or 10 minutes. At that point, I don't care how many minutes it is. I ask parents to aim for 6 days a week because we want to build that daily routine with that age group. And short, untimed practice sessions is totally fine for this age group. Now, that being said, a lot of parents will have questions about, well, how long should we be practicing? And usually the reason they ask this for age 3 to 5 is that they feel like the student is just sitting out the piano and it's so quick. They think, should we be practicing longer? Are we doing this wrong? So to reassure them, I can definitely give a minimum minute goal to shoot for if they are looking for that. So here is what I would tell them. In the very first month of lessons, take the child's age, multiply by 1, and that should be the daily practice session minimum. Again, we're not going to focus on minutes. We're not going to time it. We're not going to let the student have to sit at the piano for 15 minutes or anything like that. But just to give them an idea. So for a 3-year-old, 3-minute practice sessions every day is where we want to start. For a 5-year-old, 5-minute practice sessions. Now in their second month of lessons, we can gradually increase to their age times 2. So for a 3-year-old student, they can start to practice a little bit longer, 6 minutes or more at the piano. Again, we're not going to force that on them, but just as a general guideline, for 4-year-olds, we're looking for about 8 minutes, and then for 5-year-olds, about 10 minutes. Now, for many young students, that might be where they stop. That's their max time, and that is totally fine. In their third month, if they're doing really well and they have a long attention span, they could then triple their age for their daily practice session. So if they're 3, then they could start playing up to 9 minutes. If they're 4, 12 minutes. And if they're 5, up to 15 minutes. But again, this is not a requirement. It is just an option if it's right for that youngster. Moving into the next age group, which would be 6-year-olds to 8-year-olds. In this age group, we are still focusing way more on days than minutes. I'm still having these students aim for 6 days a week if they can every day, building that routine. And again, we're doing untimed practice sessions. However, I do have a minimum sort of guideline for those parents that are looking for the reassurance that they're doing things right at home. So the minimum minute guideline for the 6 to 8-year-olds actually works exactly the same way as the 3 to 5-year-olds. For the first month of lessons, we're going to multiply their age by 1, and that's their daily practice session. 6-year-olds are going to practice for 6 minutes a day to start out with. Gradually, moving into the second month of lessons, we can bump that up to 2 times their age. So for a 6-year-old, this would be 12-minute sessions. And then that can be where we stop, or if they're up for it, they can triple that in the third month and beyond. So for 6-year-old, they would then be practicing for 18 minutes. Some 6-year-olds are not going to be able to do that, and that is totally fine. Just a general guideline to get you in the right vicinity. Next age group is age 9 to 12. These kiddos have a much longer attention span. They've been in school for a while, and they're capable of taking on more new concepts and skills, more assignments, more books per week. Age 9 is when I start to introduce the concept of tracking practice minutes. So at this point, we are still focused on days of the week. How many days are we practicing? But now we're going to introduce the concept of minutes practice each practice session and try to start to balance those out. At this age group, our emphasis is still on getting more days of the week than not. However, we can start to observe how the patterns of the minutes practice go. As their lives get busier, at about age 9, I start to recommend 5 days a week of practice instead of 6 or 7, knowing that they're going to have weekends away, they're going to have soccer practice, and so on. But in those 5 days, we're going to introduce the concept of like a minimum minutes practice per practice session. And the formula remains the same. In the first month of lessons, they can multiply their age by 1. So 9-year-olds are practicing 9-minute sessions-ish for their first month of lessons. In the second month, we're gonna try to bump that up maybe to twice their age. So that would be an 18-minute practice session for 9-year-old students in about their second month of practice. And for a lot of them, that's gonna be their max time. But again, if they're ready to go the extra mile, then in the third month and beyond, we can work towards tripling that. Now for a 12-year-old, we're looking at half-hour practice sessions. So we might not be there yet, and that is totally fine. I have a 12-year-old at home, and I don't think that would be happening, at least in this case. So that would be for a very studious, very attentive, very ambitious student. But the average can be twice their age, and that is a great place to aim for. Our last age group is everybody 13 and up, our teens and adults. We do things a little bit different for them. Before I give that away, would you go ahead and hit that like button if you are enjoying this content or have learned anything so far yet in this video, and I'll try to make more videos like this. So teens and adults, anybody 13 and up, we're gonna focus more on minutes than days, because with this age group, they are much more capable of, let's say, cramming for the test than a 3-year-old would be. So although it's still best to have multiple days throughout the week and have our practice minutes spread out, that's always ideal. But with the teen and adult schedule, it's a little more okay if they get a 5-minute practice session here, a 40-minute practice session there, and it kind of all adds up to the right number of minutes. With teens and adults, we're still gonna aim for 5 days a week, but we're gonna have a lot of grace. If they cannot get to the piano 5 days a week, then we're gonna let them have like a longer session day if they're only doing 3 or 4 days a week. So here, age is not gonna be relevant to our formula, but what we can say more or less is their lesson length times 1 for the first month of lessons. So if they're taking 30 minutes, then we'll go for a total weekly minutes practiced of 30. If they're taking 45 minutes or 60 minutes, then that's going to be their starting weekly total. We're going to let them split that up however they need to, just as so long as those minutes get done. Now, these students are going to aim for doubling their lesson length as their total weekly practice. So again, for a 30-minute lesson student, their goal is 60 minutes practice throughout the entire week, however they want to split that up. And if they're really ambitious and want to move ahead at a quick pace, then they're going to triple their lesson length as their total minutes practiced for the week. I hope that all makes sense. So those are the exceptions for each age group. Now, the other factors that we mentioned before are not as important as age, but let's just briefly mention them. We have level. Now, this becomes relevant if you have an older beginner, let's say someone who knows absolutely nothing about music, but they are an older student. Maybe they're a teen or adult, and so they're ready to absorb and they can sit for longer than the beginner who is 6 years old. So in this case, an older beginner, we can bump up the practice expectations for them right off the bat, knowing that they're coming to us with a higher attention span, cognitive skills that they've picked up throughout their years so far on this earth. And then the next factor is goals. Of course, the students' goals are really going to determine their ultimate practice time and how much time they carve out in their weekly schedule for piano. If they are really just a hobbyist and they are really just doing this for fun, then they're gonna aim for the less, maybe the bare minimum, maybe just above, something like that. And if they want to be a music major, if they want to be a professional, if they want to progress really, really quickly and make the most out of their lessons, then they're going to aim for the higher side of all of the practice guidelines, and that's going to get them there quicker. The final factor is lifestyle. Sometimes, despite our best efforts and our goals, our life just gets in the way. And so we need to be understanding of this with our students as well. Everybody's schedule is different. Everybody's home setup and family life is different. And so in the end, sometimes lifestyle determines how much we practice more than what our heart and soul is telling us. So we have to be understanding of that as well. I hope you found this helpful as a starting place for figuring out your magic weekly practice total. And remember to grab that free practice chart so you can start tracking your minutes and see where you're at. If you want to keep watching, here's a video I made about how to best serve students that are not really practicing at home and how to deal with that situation. I hope to see you there. Bye.